We'll get through this quickly. I should apologize in advance. There is a demonstration that I want to do at the end of this, which I'm having some trouble with, so you just have to imagine. But before I start, I just wanted to say, the stuff that I'm discussing today is not an implemented online learning thing. It's mostly just us experimenting with things, basically trying to figure out why should we even try some of this stuff. So I guess the focus, well, of course, the kind of stuff that we get is about, students completely immersed in this way. And so the word gamification was something that was introduced at some point, and I thought it was interesting, but I was less interested in that idea of the technology driving it, but more just the engagement from the side of the students. And in that sort of sense, more about games rather than the technology-driven world of online gaming. But gamification as such, I think thinking about student engagement became important. We started thinking about how does it help us understand about students. So again, this is not doing a lecture on gamification, but just trying to sort of say that it was more about trying to understand students and their instincts and how they approach the material. So, trying to say the kinds who do it for socializing versus people who want to do it for personal achievement and so on and so forth. They're trying to understand what their motivations were and seeing how we can take the same content but provide it in some various ways for different types of personalities to engage with it differently. So again, the sort of good game versus bad game design is something like good lecture versus bad lecture. It's about engagement, trying to keep that going. So we said, well, all right, we should find a particular problem that we want to apply this to, rather than sort of saying, hey, let's take the whole set technology and then use it in new ways. And I teach first-year construction, and one of the biggest problems that we were facing at the time was to get design students who have very little sort of, firstly understanding and also interest in physics and maths to understand the principles of why they were doing certain things, and also visualizing. So I think construction for first years was an important thing. So we sort of saying, well, you have to think about visualizing things in 3 dimensions. You have to understand the structural principles behind it. But most of the stuff that we do is sort of, giving them textbook kind of material through lectures. I think the biggest change for me was we asked the head of the engineering department to deliver a few lectures in there, and man, I was sitting in the audience and I fell asleep, and I was like, this is when I know this stuff. I find it so boring. I can only understand design students who don't want to engage with it. So I was starting to try and address that issue of how to take that notion of three-dimensional design of construction details and bring it up to the students in, of course, a mobile sort of format. So that was my main question, is how to get them who are drawing like that to actually think like this. So the most obvious first thing I got into was literally into thinking about games as a way of increasing engagement. So the simplest thing is to have some sort of storyline that you would form with. So I'm kind of sort of saying how I did it, and maybe that helps other people to think about if they haven't got into that space. So I started with thinking about interactivity. So there has to be some sort of storyline that they can engage with, something that they relate to, not just because we find it interesting. And then, of course, the mobile access was an important part of it, and I realized that a lot of them would want to access it while they're traveling in the train or the bus or something, so it should not be wholly dependent on an internet connection as well, so downloadable stuff. And then the most obvious thing was to create a choice of things where they can, they can do multiple iterations of the same problem without it feeling repetitive, but they can practice and test their ideas. And finally, I think, which was important, that we were quite sure to kind of integrate it in a way with the rest of the course, so that it's not just an extra bit on the outside for them to do. So we first started with a very simple game, which was a role play sort of framework where the student is playing a particular role in a story. And we try to make sure that we try to make some sort of popular cultural reference or something in there, and some TV programs, so that it's not too much of a difference, so the character and they feel invested. The second thing we thought about a lot was to have a very simple interface, so it's not that the learning curve on the interface is too complex that they've got to figure out what to press where to get through the game. And so keeping the graphics simple, which was great for us as well, which meant we weren't wasting too much time trying to create something that was too fancy. And you can never really meet their expectations anyway, because they can get like a couple of dollars, they can get these really fancy games on their Xboxes or whatever, so you can't really compare to that. So we had this really simple, straightforward thing where Ted Mosby the reference, is an architect and he's going to make a little house. And of course, his site manager is Hammond Brothers, who he completely hates. So there's a setup there. And for the interaction, it was a simple sort of SMS chat kind of a thing where you would respond to certain things and there would be a chat window on the side that it worked through. So it's a very basic kind of game where there were questions that would come up and they would respond, and sometimes there would be a set of responses that they would respond to, and it would say right or wrong and let them move forward. So very basic. And then, and I'll show that to you a bit later, and sometimes we would create videos of, because we weren't able to get them to the site, we'll create videos of specific things that were happening on site to give them an introduction to, well, all right, that's probably what would happen on site, so they would have an understanding of the language. So they respond and kind of move forward through that, so pretty straightforward. But then there was also the idea that we made sure that the game wasn't just sort of by itself, so there were components of the teaching, whether it had to do with stuff in the lectures or the technical drawings that we use in the game were the same that were being taught in the CAD classes, and the content was sort of replicated everywhere, so that they didn't think that this was just an extra thing, that it would help them with the test or the exam and something else as well. So I kind of tried to integrate that, and this was a few years ago, and at that time, again, not spending too much time with the analytics, but we did see a sort of obvious spike come up in engagement when it was uploaded and we told them that it's available. They went, well, all right, we should try it out. And then we also started seeing when they were using it in relationship to the actual lecture and contact. But the interesting thing was that we also found that the hour of the day is quite interesting, because then we found that like at 1 or 2 in the morning they're still playing around with the game, which is probably, so of course a lot of them access in the middle of the day, but there's enough engagement in the middle of the night, which is probably useful that they're still thinking about construction related stuff at 1 in the morning. Okay. So from there we got a bit, we got bolder with what we can do, and we actually jumped into like full-on creation of an interactive immersive game thing, which we worked with actually colleagues here at University of Sydney. And so there was this whole sort of development where you would go in as a first person onto a site and check all the things that were going on, so you could go and interact with bits and pieces. Now, it took ages to develop that, and I don't think that was worth all that effort, but we got to go there. The good thing was that we got an OLT grant, so that helped support a little bit of that. But what came out of that was we created that, but we also created this online resource called Cellar, which is situated eLearning, which also meant that we were able to sort of make these things available through a website. So you can go to Cellar as a website and you can sort of download these things. So then we integrated back into the teaching program and sort of told students, if you want to understand this concept but you want to play a game to understand it, you can go here and download it. So that was freely available. And so that was good, but in hindsight, it was a lot of effort in content production for, I don't know, like if it becomes a common method and we can sort of fold it into a sort of pedagogy which everybody uses, maybe, but for a simple task, it's a bit too much. I don't want to waste too much time, but that's the kind of sort of interactive sort of video thing. But this is a video that's gotten out of the game, so it sort of shows them how a particular series of things would happen. I just have a really short bit there so they can understand, but the interactive version would mean that you make choices and you move things around for that to happen, so you can sort of see sequencing and things like that, so there's discussions around that.
Was this custom built, this building, for your purposes, or is this?
Yeah, the game is for the project.
Oh, this is a complete animation, this is not a real building that's being built.
No. So this is in the video game. The video game took a model of a building that we knew, and so the setup for the game was that you walk down the street and there are 17 houses on that street, and all 17 houses are the same house, but at different stages of construction. So you get to see them and interact with them at different stages. Anyway, so since then we kind of said, well, producing the game as such is not really important. We want to try and figure out how we can leverage the machine itself to try and think about other ways of teaching. So this was not about content creation that we can put online. And so the last year and a half, I've been sort of working with a couple of partners in Adelaide who've been very useful. Aerometrics is basically a mapping company which creates augmented reality sort of interactions with urban environments. Okay, so we use them for that aspect of it. And Phone Labs is a company that uses phones and the sensors, because your phones are full of sensors, as a way to communicate basic concepts in physics and stuff. So you basically use your phone as a lab. And that's my lab, Avril. So that's fancy architectural visualization, rapid prototyping, and immersion labs. Anyway, so we combine those ideas to try and produce something. So this, I don't know how much you've kind of used it, but I was using this 4 or 5 years ago when it had just sort of come out to help students engage. So instead of going all online, I created textbooks where there was material that you could put your phone on and would create extra layers of information, so it kind of made it a bit more interactive and interesting. But we started thinking about that in this terms of construction, to take two-dimensional ideas and to give them that reference to 3D. So if they can't visualize it, they use the phone to supplement their capacity to do that. So of course, Aerometrics kind of helps us with that side of it. And then the other company, which is Phone Labs, has been working with, they've recently started working with Google, so trying to look at science, teaching science, or concepts in science to sort of high school students, but basically helps us for first year students to allow them to get that same sort of thing. So it's basically what's called smartphone physics, and so there's a whole growing network of people who are looking at smartphone physics, using the sensors in the smartphone for teaching those qualities. Anyway, so with them, the thing that I've been developing, which I cannot show you, unfortunately, but I will do bits and pieces of it, and the rest you'll have to visualize. Okay. So what we're doing is, this is the lovely design thinking diagram with the
That's fun.
stuff happening. So in the concept that we're in this stage, which is, well, all right, try to develop ideas, then try to see whether they work or not, and then create a prototype, and so on and so forth. So one of the things that we were doing is to transition again. So I've tried to establish that we're interested in the augmented world, which means you work in a physical reality and then transfer it. So if this will work, so you've got to help visualize now. So basically what you do is you sketch a structure, okay? And then on all the joints you put these pins up, so it recognizes color, right? Then you use your webcam to sort of look at it. So basically the sensors help you map where the points are, and you can shift them around, and it sort of maps that, okay? And then it transfers it into a program whose very ugly and old version I can't show you, because I did have that on my computer, which we developed 3 years ago, which has become much slicker since then. But so it kind of goes into a program. We created an early version of this, and basically if you, oh, sorry, why is that? Oh, because I'm still on PowerPoint. How do I stop the PowerPoint? Sorry, I need some help with this. I don't know, I'm switching over PowerPoint, but it's not. It's still continuing to show that on the screen. It is just computer. So that's not what's on the screen. Okay. Alright, put it off and on again.
Just destroyed your computer.
Whoa! Okay, well, that's fine. I'll just sort of tell you how it's supposed to work, and hopefully I can send a video around later or something like that. So the idea is that you sketch this thing out, and then you identify what the points would be, and then you use the webcam. So it uses real-time tracking, so you can work with that structure itself, but basically it transfers into another program where you can load things, right, in different places, and it uses a structure that you just sketched and shows you how it would perform. Okay, and you can make changes to it, and when you're happy, you can 3D print a prototype of it. So it kind of just transfers into a 3D. So you can print out, so you can sketch something, test it, make changes, and print out a 3D.
You sketch a plan? That's all you need to start with?
So you sketch what? You sketch a plan, and then when you put it in the program, you can give it the third dimension, and then you can load and test how it would behave. So you have got different types of loadings, and it will sort of show in red and blue what are in stress and what kind of material and all that. And then when you're happy with it, you 3D print the thing out, so you get. Never mind, that's all right. I'll send out a video which will be probably more useful. And that's pretty much it.
Oh, great. Some quick questions for Emmett before we move on? No? There's ideas from both of those presentations that I want to steal straight away. So, and that brings
well, there's one other thing. The good news is the sensor-based thing is actually, it's on a website and it's free. So technically, once I tell you how to use it, you can use it. All you need is a webcam, and you can just sketch it and try. Of course, not the 3D printing part that we're holding on to, but but the web tracking aspect of it, that is really available.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Emmett. Thanks, Michael. And in fact, thanks to all the presenters today. I think, at the very beginning we were wondering, can we put presentations in there, but I think it's vastly better with the presentations through the day. So that's been great. So we're talking about collaboration, research opportunities, and the gamification and the flipped classroom for the last half an hour. I think we've got. And I don't know whether people want to reorganise the groups entirely. That's up to you. You might maybe share each other around. But essentially,